What's up, world? I'm Cameron McKinney, and this is Pop Culture Spotlight, a podcast about the movie Materialists. Here's a quick synopsis. Lucy, a matchmaker, meets a guy, Harry, at the wedding of one of her clients, and while there also reconnects with her ex-boyfriend, John. The film stars Dakota Johnson, Chris Evans, Pedro Pascal, Zoe Winters, and Marin Ireland. Standout performances. For some people, Dakota Johnson will always just be the person from the 50 Shades films, and for others, she'll be known for the recent failure of Madam Web. The movies of hers that have gotten the most attention are not, in my opinion, the best, but she's been more than stellar in the films Black Mass, playing Lindsay Sear, the girlfriend of Whitey Bulger, played by Johnny Depp. It's an underrated movie. A Bigger Splash, playing Penelope, the daughter of Harry, a music producer, played by Ray Fiennes. Johnson's first movie with director Luca Guadagnino, both in 2015. The Peanut Butter Falcon, playing Eleanor, a caretaker at a nursing home. It's a heartwarming film. Our Friend as Nicole, a wife and mother diagnosed with cancer, a sad movie that's really good and moving. In it, she's paired with Casey Affleck and Jason Segel, both in 2019. The High Note, as aspiring music producer Maggie. I love the chemistry between her and co-star Kelvin Harrison Jr. in 2020. The Lost Daughter, playing Nina, a young mother. Many think this should have gotten her an Oscar nom in 2021. Cha-Cha Real Smooth as Domino, a mother who begins to connect to her child's babysitter. Johnson is great in that underseen movie. Am I Okay, where Dakota Johnson plays Lucy, who begins to realize she's been wrong about her own sexuality. I liked the film's comedic tone mixed with genuine emotion, both films in 2022. And Daddy-O, playing a woman who has a long conversation with a taxi driver about her life. In it, she's paired with Sean Penn in 2024. Those 8 roles are what made me believe Dakota Johnson is a real deal performer. In Materialists, Johnson plays Lucy, a matchmaker who on one hand has high standards when it comes to what she's looking for in a man, and on the other doesn't view herself as good enough for successful ones. I do think in the hands of a lesser actress, you could see this character coming off as annoying, more of a sitcom-like character, being fixated on money and success. Though I do like the fact that the character does not like that she obsesses over those things. With Johnson, you relate to her, and she makes you see where Lucy is coming from. She's more than the stereotype of the business-driven woman you see in a lot of these romantic comedies. This is a movie star role, and Dakota Johnson is just that, a movie star. It can be hard at times being a supporter of actor Chris Evans. He's been great in really good movies. Danny Boyle's Sunshine, him, Cillian Murphy, and Rose Byrne are terrific. Edgar Wright's Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. It's Evans playing a fictional movie star. Bong Joon-ho's Snowpiercer, the best movie he's been the lead of. And Rian Johnson's Knives Out. The best thing in flawed movies, Not Another Teen Movie, Fantastic Four, and The Gray Man, but recently was on a bit of an uninspired run that includes Ghosted, Pain Hustlers, and possibly the worst holiday film of all time, Red One. No actor has been a victim of the streaming era of movies more so than Evans. The consensus is that the actor has not properly used his Marvel fame from starring as Captain America 7 times in Captain America the First Avengers, The Avengers, Captain America the Winter Soldier, Avengers Age of Ultron, Captain America Civil War, Avengers Infinity War, and Avengers Endgame, the way that his co-star Sebastian Stan has from playing the Winter Soldier. I personally find it incredibly odd that we are living in a world where Sebastian Stan has an Oscar nomination before Chris Evans. And I'd like to think that it has nothing to do with talent, that it has to do with the career choices made by the two. I know that I was hoping that Materialist would be a return to form, and I'm happy to announce that is the case. In the film, Evans plays Charlie, who is an actor who up till this point has not yet received steady work, still living in an apartment with multiple roommates, and like his co-star Dakota Johnson, Chris Evans is able to play this character who could turn turn into a cliche into a real person. And finally, last week on this podcast, I talked about how good Pedro Pascal was as Reed Richards in the Fantastic Four First Steps. In this movie, Materialist, he plays Harry, a wealthy man who begins to date Johnson's Lucy, and I have absolutely no problem with the overall performance. He's good in the movie. The problem is with the character itself. I could tell right away how the arc of Harry was going to play out. I was talking about how the other two characters in this movie feel like real people, and Harry is the one who does not. He feels more like a concept or an idea, and I don't blame that on Pedro Pascal. I think it's a thankless role. For the most part, critics aren't always that interested in the romantic comedy genre, but this movie is different because it's written and directed by Celine Song, who is coming off of the romantic drama Past Lives, which got her Oscar nominated for both Best Picture and Screenplay, so the interest stems from the fact that people wanted to see if she can bring her film style to a more mainstream movie. I ultimately think the answer is yes, and it all has to do with the strength of the dialogue. It's the thing that makes Materialists stand out. Now is a great time to be talking about the writer and director because it was recently announced that she is writing a sequel movie to the beloved Julia Roberts film, My Best Friend's Wedding. And that gets me to this. It appears to me that Song's interest in this genre seems to be about the idea of complicated love triangles in films. It's there in Past Lives, it's the entire movie when it comes to Materialist, and it's worth noting her husband, Justin Kuritzkis, wrote the film Challengers, which also has a love triangle at the center, and the problem with most movies about a love triangle is it's usually clear to the audience which character is going to end up with who, and that is something I kind of struggled with when it came to Materialist. But what propels the movie above that for me is that it does give an adequate reason as to why Lucy chooses who she chooses and is clearly interested in exploring that. I do want to get into the matchmaker element of this movie in the plot. The movie is making a statement on modern dating. Whether or not you agree with that statement is a whole other issue. There was a fear I had going into this movie that it would be too similar to the Will Smith movie Hitch. While I admit an entertaining flick, I find it to be massively flawed, and no one in it talks like a real person. Materialist was far more judgmental of its protagonist, who views themselves as an expert on love, and I liked how having the profession can weigh on you and make you a cynic. For me, the movie pulls all of that off and then some. This is a strange movie for me that was unpredictable in a lot of ways, but really predictable in others. Like, you could tell who Dakota Johnson's character was going to end up with whom she was calling when she needed help. Like, I just don't know why the movie made it so obvious. I just don't think in the case of the writer-director here, she was all that interested in who Lucy ends up with. She's more interested in the why she ends up with that person. I don't want to get into spoilers here, but I bet you can gather from what I've said on this podcast so far about the two characters who are properly developed and the one character who is not. In the case of most movies, that would be the dagger. That would be the fatal flaw of the film, and I would think to myself, man, this movie does not work. But the two performances that really did work on me carry the entire film, and I wanted to spend more time with those actors and more time watching their performances, which is the entire point of a romantic comedy. Oscar chances. At one point, this movie, Materialist, was treated like an awards contender. Now I don't see that happening. I don't think Celine Song is going to get nominated for the screenplay, and I don't think the trio of actors will either, and that doesn't upset me. What does is treating this movie like every other romantic comedy. I think this is a singular filmmaker bringing her vision to a genre. The movie feels cinematic. It stars movie stars, it looks really good compared to the other versions of streaming movies you get in the genre nowadays. Why I struggle with romantic movies in general is because there's a bit of a laziness when it comes to them. Oh, here's this movie star actor paired with this movie star actress. They are going to have lightning chemistry, and they are going to get you to care about them no matter what is happening on screen. And I agree, there's a bit of a magic trick to that, but I like these movies way more when they have actual substance behind them, and I think this movie has that. The selling point to me wasn't the fact that it's a romantic comedy, it's the fact that it was written and directed by Celine Song, who's coming off of a big indie success, and now she's working on a studio movie with the likes of Dakota Johnson and Chris Evans, whose arcs of their careers I find endlessly fascinating. Even if you are one of the harshest critics of this film, you have to admit this is one of the better entries of their entire filmographies. I mean, let's not go crazy here. I think what's interesting about this movie is clearly Song is interested in the star power of her free actors. Like, I think she cares about Dakota Johnson's movie star persona, and she knows how to get a good performance out of Chris Evans. I mean, I don't want to insult these movies too much, but clearly Madam Web has zero interest in the movie star Dakota Johnson. It's just trying to be a vehicle to make money. The same with Red One. Like, movies that should actually care about them as movie stars don't. And it's a real fresh of breath air to see a studio movie in Materialist that clearly does. I do have one final thought on Dakota Johnson and Chris Evans as a whole. Like, I don't think this means necessarily that this movie is going to change the trajectory of their careers. I think these are actors who have big swings and misses. Like, I think they are going to continue to be inconsistent when it comes to the movies that they star in, and there is something really interesting in that. Like, I know we all want to get to a place where Chris Evans is just hitting a home run after home run, but one of my favorite actors is Ben Affleck, and one of the reasons why is his career is like no other. He has a million ups and downs. He wins an Oscar, then he plays Batman, then we don't like him again, then he's giving really good performances. It's a roller coaster ride, and I think the same is going to remain with Chris Evans and Dakota Johnson. What I am willing to go out on a limb for is to say that I believe both of them at some point in the next 5 years is going to give a performance that gets them nominated for an Oscar. I think a Chris Evans Best Supporting Actor nomination is on the way at some point, and Dakota Johnson is going to get a Best Leading Actress at some point. The actors that constantly bounce back are just way more interesting than the ones who have a steady ride. It's why more people are interested in the career of Matthew McConaughey than they are in the career of Matt Damon. Box office. Materialist was a modest hit, making $62 million on a $20 million budget. And even more important than that is, this is a movie that was talked about. People have strong feelings and opinions on it, both good and bad. And that noise around a film is not something you see all of the time anymore. I just don't think we're headed back to a side of the genre that was led by Julia Roberts, where every movie she was in, every romantic comedy, was a giant hit. Now, one person who could prove me wrong is Sydney Sweeney. I mean, she's already had a giant hit romantic comedy, and if she continues to make them, maybe she will become the face of the genre. I just don't care about the type of movie that Anyone But You is. It's the type of movie that gets me disinterested in the romantic comedy in general. I do wonder if most people find this film, The Materialist, to be funny. I thought most of the funny scenes were the ones with Chris Evans being a man-child. Like, he was born to play in scenes like that. All of the other scenes where Dakota Johnson's Lucy is interviewing potential clients, I don't really care for. I've seen that kind of movie before. And that's the thing about Materialist, is it's at its best when it is being its own movie. When it is trying to duplicate something you've already seen in other movies is when, in my opinion, the movie falls flat. Do I think this movie is successful in almost every way? Absolutely. Like, I wanted it to be a star vehicle vehicle for Dakota Johnson and Chris Evans. I wasn't all that interested in Pedro Pascal going into this movie because I knew that's a guy who's already going to get a million chances to be in good movies. Gladiator 2, The Fantastic Four: First Steps. He's got a Mandalorian movie on the way. He's in Eddington. We've seen Pedro Pascal. I get the Pedro Pascal experience at this point. What I needed from this movie desperately was to walk away from it saying that Dakota Johnson and Chris Evans are really good in it, and that the movie itself is very good, and both are the case here. I also think it's always a turning point in a writer-director's career where they are given a movie star to be in their movies, and Celine Song was given Dakota Johnson and Chris Evans. I mean, we've seen it in the past. Guy Ritchie in Snatch was given Brad Pitt. Paul Thomas Anderson was given the late great Burt Reynolds, and Wes Anderson was given Bill Murray. If the first time you work with a movie star is uber successful, usually you get to work with bigger and bigger movie stars, and I am going to be really interested to see if Celine Song gets the opportunity to work with Julia Roberts on a sequel to My Best Friend's Wedding. That is going to be a huge movie if it ends up happening. I am perfectly okay if you have the opinion that The Materialist is not a good movie. What I do struggle with is this idea that Celine Song should not aspire to make bigger studio movies, that she should continue to be an indie filmmaker only chasing Oscar glory. That is something to me that I find to be completely absurd. The best filmmakers of all time make all kinds of movies. I had the same issue when people were talking about Barry Jenkins making a Mufasa movie for Disney. Like, it's okay that he wanted to make that really good movie, in my opinion. It also doesn't mean he's never going to make another movie like Moonlight, and this doesn't mean that Celine Song isn't going to make another film like Past Lives. I just don't understand this idea of you wanting the same writer-directors to make the same kinds of movies over and over again. I want to see the best directors make all different kinds of movies in all different kind of genres. I don't want Celine Song to just make romantic comedies from here on out. Would I like to see her work within the genre again? Absolutely, and after watching this, I think most feel the same. I want the Barry Jenkinses and the Celine Songs of the world to work within the studio system at certain points in their career, because I think the writing in most of those movies are really bad. I want to see big budget films written and directed by both Barry Jenkins and Celine Song. I also don't believe that the only reason she made this movie was to appease a mainstream audience. In fact, it feels like half of you are not pleased about the final outcome when it comes to this movie. In the end, this is a movie that right now I really like, and after a few rewatches, I might learn to love. Like, I think it's the kind of movie that's only going to grow in my estimation the more Chris Evans's and Dakota Johnson's career goes along. I'm going to go back to it and go, see, this is what these two actors are capable of, and I really hope we see more of them doing that in the future. Yes, there's a part of me that wants this movie in the awards conversation. I mean, I would love nothing more than for Chris Evans to get an Oscar nomination here for Best Supporting Actor. I just know it's not going to happen. I don't know about Celine Song and a possible screenplay nomination. I still believe it could happen depending on the other screenplays she's up against. The Academy should try to bring in movies like this that were successful at the box office, that a lot of people have seen and talked about. Overall, the best romantic comedies in my eyes are the ones with sharp dialogue that are star-studded, and that's what The Materialist is. My final take on Dakota Johnson is she should work with writer-director Celine Song again. I mean, can you imagine a sequel to My Best Friend's Wedding that not only brings back Julia Roberts and Cameron Diaz, but also adds on Dakota Johnson? That's the movie the world needs right now. Also, after the failure of Madam Web, I just want to see Dakota Johnson be in a more mainstream, successful movie. I guess what I really want is for Dakota Johnson to have her version of Margot Robbie's Barbie, like just a gigantic, undeniable success. Because I really do believe that she is an actress worthy of far more critical and commercial success. If you, like myself, are a fan of Dakota Johnson, you will definitely enjoy her work in Materialist. Thanks for listening to this edition of Pop Culture Spotlight. I'm Cameron McKinney, and there'll be a new episode of the podcast every Thursday on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. I highly recommend you check out the film Materialist. Next week on the podcast, I'm talking about the movie Sovereign, starring Nick Offerman and Jacob Tremblay, so tune into that. And please rate, review, and subscribe.